just spent a very interesting 3 days at the Munich Security Conference, which is relatively high-end security. It's one of the Davos of security. There were a lot of attention given to what's the mood in Washington, what can happen with the big relationships, particularly the Russian-American and the Chinese-American. Today I'm with Paul Sidhu, our Vice President, and runs our Weapons of Mass Destruction and other program work at the Institute. And Paul, what I thought we'd do is talk a little bit about let's focus on maybe the U.S.-Russia piece this time. There's a lot of interesting things happening, and there's on one hand a sense of optimism that it looks like the New START treaty has been announced recently, that the agreement's there. Now they're just writing it up. That's a big thing. But the question comes down right away, it worries a lot of us, is whether or not Washington is in the mood, particularly the Congress, to move forward with this, and whether or not, in fact, that treaty will, when it gets into its final treaty form, can actually will actually pass the Senate.
That's right, John. Absolutely, and I think there's two elements here. One is the great degree of expectations which have come up from communities which want to go forward in trying to disarm even further. On the other hand, you've got the reality of domestic politics. On the one hand, the big sort of challenge that we had, or Obama administration had in Massachusetts, has changed the equation. But even before that, you will recall that the Senate, 41 senators had already signed a letter saying that they will not ratify the START unless it sort of covers a whole bunch of things. So, given that you just were recently in Washington, D.C. and talking to your friends and colleagues there, what was your sense of that? I mean, how real is that concern?
Well, in Washington and in Munich, people are worried about a whole series of things coming up with the Senate. The Senate, this is the year of the Senate. What's going to happen, for good or bad, in international security is largely going to be turned. It starts with the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, right, which was once rejected by the Senate years ago. Now is back up again. Some senators, like Senator Lugar, who voted against it, are now, are they going to support it or vote against it? It has a lot to do with issues. It's tied, I think, to the START treaty, to the new treaty, and what's going to happen. And I think the mood is one of, the best you get is people who say, well, cautiously, maybe I'm wrong and things will go well in the Senate. But I think most people are fairly pessimistic about it's going to be a hard fight. It's going to be a hard fight.
That's right. And even if it does go through the Senate, which, as you said, is already a hard fight, although I was at this one seminar where Senator Lugar was there, and you're absolutely right, he indicated that START would be acceptable if there was very clear verification dimensions into that. Now, it seems like we have had that breakthrough going forward. And that is what is going to happen. So I think that may facilitate it some. But even if, let's assume there's a minor miracle in this year of the election and that this treaty is ratified by the Senate, it in fact doesn't go far enough for a lot of people. Carl Bildt, for example, who's the foreign minister of Sweden, and Radek Sikorski of Poland have just written an article in the New York Times saying, well, this is not enough. What are the U.S. and Russia doing about tactical nukes?
It may not be enough, but it's going to be as much as one can possibly imagine getting through this year.
That's right.
This is not a good year to be doing these kinds of things. By the way, I was just looking across here. We got the CTBT, your publication. Tell us what's different this time on the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty than last time when it was turned down. What's different?
A couple of things I think are significant. One of them is that a lot of the technical capabilities, the scientific and technical capabilities to assure the safety, reliability, and security of U.S. nuclear weapons is in place. However, and this is an important caveat, however, there is also an understanding that the present situation cannot last forever, that there will have to be a constant upgradation of those capabilities, not the weapons, of the capabilities. And this has become very clear in the latest budget. You will see for the first time, this administration has given over $500 million to the laboratories, to these facilities, to ensure the maintenance of the nuclear weapon capability in a safe and secure fashion.
And that might be enough to persuade key senators to vote positive.
It's going to be an important element in many of them being able to justify changing their vote
Right, that's right.
from 1999 to 2010.
Right.
But it may not be enough, because it would depend on what are the other politics. As you said very rightly, this is the year of the Senate. So it depends on what else is coming up to the Senate in the domestic politics, and that may very well determine, what is going to go through. If you recall, in 1999, technical capabilities were one of the reasons
Right.
why the
Why it
CDBD
was turned
failed.
down, right.
But there were other reasons as well, including political reasons like the impending impeachment. In fact, not the impending, but the the failed impeachment, if you like, or the tried impeachment. So now, I'm not saying that President Obama is in that situation at all, but
there are elections.
there could
It's
be
an
other
election
elements.
year, and
That's right.
it's going to be a different time.
So I think that might well play into
I
this
think the
as
big
well.
thing to remember is that these things do matter, and so we're about to turn to a new level of Iran sanctions. We're constantly talking how we need Russia, we need China.
Right.
If the Senate did not ratify CTBT and certainly the new arms
START.
control agreement, this new START agreement, it seems to me that we could pretty well kiss Russian cooperation on anything like cooperative missile defense or a lot of these other things, and maybe even on sanctions and other things, goodbye.
Absolutely, but in fact, there's even more reason now to keep up this kind of degree of engagement, and that is that even though the number of nuclear weapons have gone down relatively, they need to go down further, and there is a recognition both in Moscow and Washington
Right.
that we need to do that, and the weapons that we have, we need to also make sure that they're safe and secure, and that there is strategic stability, and so that's another element that we will certainly be working on. Both with the US and Russia, but also perhaps the other nuclear weapon states. Because as the number of nuclear weapons go down, what does this do to strategic stability? And let's also not forget this entire discussion and talk about cooperative ballistic missile defense. So there's a lot of reasons why we would need to engage first with Russia,
Right.
but then with a lot of other nuclear weapon states as well.
I think one of the things that a lot of us are concerned about, we talked about in Munich and also in Washington last week, was the whole issue of how do we begin to think about moving beyond that, mutual assured destruction. What does strategic stability mean in a different way? What is the offensive versus defensive weapons? What happens with ballistic missile defense? What kind of
Right.
thing? I mean, I think all of this is big. So these are the big critical issues. I think an awful lot of people think it's going to be tough to get these things through. Let's hope that they're wrong.
Indeed,